Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I see that there's still a few folks logging on to the platform. We'll give them another minute or so, and then we'll start. Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on 5 strategies to kickstart your data resolutions in 2020. My name is Daniel Cooperman, and I'm going to be your moderator today. But before I introduce today's presenter, let's just cover a few housekeeping items. So first, you can ask questions throughout the duration of the webinar via the Q&A box you should see on the right-hand side of the slides in your screen. We are going to hold all questions until the end of the presentation, but I encourage you to ask questions early on. Second, if you'd like to learn more about Snowflake products and features, I do recommend reviewing the resource box, also on the bottom of your screen, where you'll find links to upcoming webinars, ebook content, and also our popular virtual hands-on lab, where you can try Snowflake for free in an instructor-led environment. Also, in the resources box, you see information about our upcoming Data for Breakfast events. We are going to be in over 60 cities, and we're kicking that series off right now. So make sure to check that out and sign up for a city near you. Now, lastly, this webinar is going to be recorded, and we're going to send you a link to the recording tomorrow. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to today's speaker, Matt Glickman, Vice President of Customer and Product Strategy at Snowflake. Matt is an industry leader in enterprise data platforms, and he spent over 20 years leading development of business-critical analytics platforms at Goldman Sachs. As a managing director, he was responsible for the entire data platform of Goldman's $1 trillion asset management business. And Matt also led Goldman's risk management platform, where his team built Goldman's first company-wide data warehouse that helped it navigate the 2008 financial crisis. Matt holds a bachelor's degree in computer science and applied mathematics from Brigham Young University. Matt is also the VP of business development for the Snowflake Data Exchange. So, Matt, take them away.
Thank you, Daniel. So I'm here. Thank you all for joining. It's great to have you all here today. I was watching the attendees join, and it's a diverse group of people who are joining us live today. It's still January, so we can still talk about New Year's, and we're going to kick off what are the 5 strategies to kick off your data analytics resolutions. So why don't we'll kick it off. So our agenda today, we'll talk about some trends. Some of these are obvious, some of these are not, depending on how much you've been tracking it. So what are the trends in data growth that we're seeing and our customers are seeing? What are the key challenges that we're seeing people face as they're dealing with their existing data resources and all this data growth? We'll talk about some of you, our customers, who are helping us learn where are the trends, what are the opportunities for us to work together on. And we'll talk about 5 concrete strategies that you can apply to address these challenges. And then, as Daniel said, we'll open it up to Q&A. So I don't think I need to state the obvious, but to put into some concrete terms of the data growth that we're seeing, it's effectively exponential growth that we're seeing of both original data as well as data that is replicated and derived from that original data. The other interesting thing that you can look at from here is there's an explosion of not only traditional structured data, but semi-structured data or unstructured data that is effectively starting to overtake even the structured data that people are having to deal with. And both these kind of data sets that are exploding is really the reason, the problems that people face today. Where is that coming from? So this is just a couple of analysts' data that I think is helpful, is to see that there's this massive growth of data that's coming not only from traditional data, but from mobile data, right? Obviously, everyone now, a huge percentage of the planet has mobile devices, and each of these mobile devices is always connected. And there's a whole trail of data that's coming out of these mobile devices that's being used to provide personalized experiences and full-on interactive experiences constantly in each of these applications that people are using. So that is driving a massive amount of data growth, and analysis of that data is a key to, I'm sure, many of you on the phone. And maybe less obviously, but today, IoT is no longer just a concept, it's real, right? There's 200 million smart speakers alone in the IoT space, and growing, that are producing, consuming data at massive scale that we've never seen before. So what does this mean? I think this is actually an interesting quote from one of our partners, Frank Bean at Looker, where data is now the new application. Right? This is now fundamental to how people get work done, and the most successful companies are thinking about data differently and integrating it into not just the data analytics teams, not just the data science teams, but everyone at modern companies and modern enterprises are using data as part of their daily jobs. Another interesting trend, and this has actually been coming up more and more in the customers and events that I've been speaking at, is this notion of a clean room, a data clean room. And one of the problems that hasn't been spoken about, in the past, and is now becoming more of a common problem, is that I have data, and my partner, my customer, another company I'm working with has data, and we want to blend these data sets together without revealing the PII, the private identifying data, private identifying fields about this data. Right? I have data about, customers maybe, keyed by their email address, and someone else has that data. We cannot exchange that data amongst each other, but we need to be able to blend it together in a secure way. This is something, and we'll talk about some interesting solutions in that space. This is something that had been a problem that had plagued the industry, that I believe for the first time we have a solution that can solve this problem in a way that was never been solved before. So what are the kind of the key challenges that kind of belie all this? The first is, again, a reality check that many big data projects, many more are failing than are succeeding, right? It's really closer to 85% of, however you cast the net, of big data. 25% of big data, more modern analytics projects are failing. Right? This is something that we have, that Gartner's provided that data. So as a reality check, this is a major problem. The second is that AI machine learning projects are fundamentally going to succeed based on the data that they can use and gather to provide better models, better predictions, right? And these are real problems, right? This is where, and we've seen a lot of this in the media, where there's bias that comes in to these models just because of the data that they were sourcing. They don't have enough data. Getting data in a usable form is a significant challenge. Having the ability to label their data and qualify their data, and this is and even just fundamental training problems. Like, this is when you think about actually using models in production use cases, a large percent of the challenge getting these models into production is not tuning the models. It's actually acquiring the data into the right format to be able to power these models. The next problem, and this is near and dear to my heart, one of the main reasons why I came to Snowflake, is this problem of sharing data or exchanging data between enterprises is this hidden evil that is extremely painful, extremely high friction of getting data out of one organization, extracting it, transforming it, and providing it to the other side. And this is not only for traditional, what we think about as data providers. This is for everyone who's basically performing operations today with their partners, with their customers. There's data transfer going on, right? I'm sure this is not news to this audience if you tuned in today, but this is something that many people who are just consuming data don't understand how much of a friction, how much challenge there is, and that there's FTP sites or cloud, S3 buckets, or even worse, that there's APIs that, while seemingly could give you a sense for who's consuming this data in the right format, now it's effectively you're trying to pull down, get terabytes, potentially even petabytes of data through a straw, right? And trying to maintain that data throwing through at that kind of volume is just impractical. So, this is the kind of the state of the world as it's been, right? It's time intensive, it's costly, and as well as in security concerns. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit as well. But the fact that this data is being shipped in some way and now received on the other side, if you're responsible to maintain custody of that data, it's gone, right? And trying to maintain control, like the days of doing audits to see where the data is going, are just do not scale. We're talking about the amount of data that's being used in this day and age. And obviously this will not only not scale, but at least there's this poor user experience for people who are trying to make business decisions and are now production requirements on this data. So this sharing data is not new. Exchanging data, providing data to other enterprises or even within enterprises is extremely painful and extremely costly. And this is the hidden evil that we're seeing more and more being revealed. So the good news is there is a better way, right? One of the things that came out of the cloud and came out of platforms like Snowflake that we'll be talking about, today, is that because of the fact that there is this interconnected cloud, and because of the fact that it's global and standardized, and platforms like Snowflake are being built to bring these cloud resources together so that different customers, different companies are effectively unifying on the standard, this allows a data provider, again, either someone who's selling data or someone who's providing it for their customers, to be able to give access securely to data consumers without any of this friction, right? It literally becomes the equivalent of when you go to a website and you go to you go to CNN.com, you don't download that content and keep it on your laptop and think about maybe it's stale. You point at it, and you point at it, and you get the latest, right? That's effectively what we're seeing now. That's now possible. If I have data and I need to exchange it with my partner, I grant access to it, and it just appears. It's always up to date, and it doesn't have to be the whole notion of extraction, refreshing APIs, that now goes away. And the other interesting thing is that now, with this real-time access, consumers of data are seeing directly the data that they're supposed to see from their data providers. And actually, even more interestingly, they can now collaborate on data in real time, right? Where traditionally, if I was providing someone data and then there was issues that they had with that data, there was so many steps along the way that data could have become stale or mistransformed or put into the wrong shape. Now, I'm talking with my customer who could be in another side of the world connecting to a complete different, cloud data center, we're looking at the same data at the same time, and we can basically say like, hey, this data from this year looks like it flattened. Are you seeing the same thing? Is that expected? This was unheard of up until now. This is the world we're living in today. So, again, I want to kind of raise it up a level and talk about some of the use cases, some of the learnings that we're hearing from, and we're working with our customers who are using this technology to exchange data in real time, leveraging the cloud. Again, what you'd expect to be able to do in the 21st century. So the first one is one of our customers, our partners, WeatherSource. So one of the things that we've enabled is the ability to not only be able to exchange this real-time pointers to another organization's data, but it's providing a catalog of these data sets that are available on platform in what we call the Snowflake Data Exchange. So WeatherSource was one of our first customers at launch to be able to list their data in our exchange so that any Snowflake customer can basically select that data and it becomes a read-only database that's always updated in their Snowflake account with no copy of that data. As soon as the weather is changing and WeatherSource updates that data, it's updated and you see the live data and you can join it with your data if you want to plug that into your model to be able to use weather as one of the data sets that you can compare with the cities that you're analyzing and you want to see how the weather in those cities has done historically. You can now do that again in real time. They provide a freemium model, and then you can work with them to get more real-time versions of that data. Again, all the friction has gone away. We're seeing a huge amount of our customers get excited about having this valuable weather data available at their fingertips. And I think it's just scratching the surface of what data providers can do when they can reach out to this customer base without having to think about the pipes to get the data there. Another interesting customer we're working with is FactSet. FactSet, I know from my previous life, is one of the bigger names in the financial data space. And they realized that there was a huge opportunity to partner with Snowflake and distribute their data to their customers on Snowflake and basically be able to use the fact of their quality of their data and have that be the differentiating capability, and remove all that friction for their customers, and providing data like benchmark index compositions or other kind of entity data, and having that data be directly listed via Snowflake Data Exchange, and have that be a place where they can point their customers at. And the nice thing now is that unlike traditional platforms where a FactSet would have to stand up their own compute for their customers to be able to analyze and evaluate data, now FactSet's customers can bring their own Snowflake account and be able to, again, get a real-time version of that FactSet data, join it with their own, and bring their own compute to the equation instead of having to have that compute provided by the FactSets of the world. So this was a super strategic customer we brought on platform, and a very exciting one to see embrace this as a new standard of how data gets distributed. Another interesting use case is ATHEON Analytics. They're based in the UK. They're in the retail space, particularly in the food retail space, where there's a lot of opportunity to be able to understand what's selling, how it's selling, and being able to provide this. They've actually built products around this capability, which is, again, super exciting, where they're now providing real-time, what they call SKU track to the food retailers, customers of theirs, that they can provide their customers with real-time analytics on what's selling, how it's which product is selling more by category, all delivered directly into their customers' data warehouses without them having to do anything new. What's really exciting is these guys have effectively put all their cards into this as their differentiating capability to be able to work with their customers in a way that they can never do before. Super exciting. Another interesting customer and partner of ours, RAKUTEN. RAKUTEN is an e-commerce company, which has effectively been growing and with more companies that they are including into their portfolio. And they have one of the more interesting problems where they have internal RAKUTEN businesses as well as external partners and vendors and merchants that they work with, that they're basically going to use this as a way to share data amongst their business units while it's still ensuring governance. Right? This is another thing, that being able to say that they can hold control and see who has access and be able to monitor access to that data and augment it on the fly based on who's consuming it. So the same data can be enriched, can be masked, can be anonymized based on who is consuming it internally or externally, and monitoring all that in a unified way so they can see these Rakuten businesses are consuming this data, these external vendors are consuming this data, and building business models around that. Again, I think we're just scratching the surface. Super exciting customer use case that really combines a private exchange of data with the more external exchange of data, all within one platform, all with the right resources, and each party doing their own analysis on the data without contention with one another. And then as soon as the data gets updated, all the parties that need to see this data can see the right data at the right time. And the last thing I hear that's interesting is it's bi-directional. Right? So now this is a way for Rakuten's merchants and vendors to provide them data so that they can enrich it and provide it back, all at a much lower cost, all in just in a just works kind of methodology where they don't have to get burdened by infrastructure, and keeping this at a business level. Like, this is, we're going to do business. Now we do business. This is part of their value proposition to their merchants and their vendors, is they now have a very differentiated way to exchange data and exchange analytics on that data. So another super exciting use case. So let's boil this down to 5 strategies. Again, still New Year's, still the first month of the year. What are the 5 strategies that you all can take? And we're seeing many of our customers follow these patterns, and I'm happy to share those patterns with you. First one, and this is where I think we're starting to see this boom of the role of the chief data officer. Gartner is seeing this explode as a key new, not only part of your enterprise, but as part of the senior leadership of companies, hiring a chief data officer, but more importantly, embracing them and empowering them to be able to set the direction on how does a company leverage the data they have and also get their hands around the data that they're bringing in a unified, scalable way that couldn't have been done before. And this is really the blend of infrastructure and the business and putting it into context. So we're seeing this as and Gartner mentions it, but we're seeing this as a common theme now. We're now, big and small companies are now hiring and promoting chief data officers. The second, and again, this is, I believe you can have one without the other. It's great to have that as a company-wide focus, but you need a platform that can actually deliver on what we've been talking about. This is not just, concepts. Right? You need to have a platform that just does this out of the box. Clearly, we're talking about Snowflake today, but the key capabilities that make this possible is that no one's going to pick a single cloud, right? It's either within a company or within industry. There's three primary cloud vendors that we're seeing globally, and you need a platform which will allow you to bridge the gaps between them. You need to have the ability for this to be something that you can do real scalable analytics and data warehousing as a core capability. But you need to have it be something that's unified to not only do your warehousing, but do your data science, and most importantly, allow you to be able to exchange data across your enterprise and between across to other enterprises, all as a built-in capability in the platform. We're going to see more and more of this, but that's the place we should be starting from. The third, and this is something that I think is particularly interesting, is that everyone, we were talking about 30% of chief data officers, but basically every company has data assets, right, that they either are harnessing or a lot of them that aren't. So this is something that we're seeing, that this thinking about data as a true asset, that where the chief data officer is going to highlight that to the CFO as these are assets that we have that either is something that should be part of our valuation, should be part of any kind of investments that other companies are making, private equity or otherwise. Data assets are a concrete thing that once you remove that friction, it becomes a much clearer asset that should be part of a valuation of every company that are out there, because now this is something that is easily demonstrated at a very senior level of a company. So valuing your company's data assets, and we're not just saying it, Gartner's seeing this a lot, as this has been a common theme. The next is collaboration, which we talked about as something that we're seeing more and more of, right? Collaborating across your organization in a secure way across all of your data, right? And this starts within your internal organization between teams, right? The idea of data silos and how that sucks away all potential of what you could possibly do is where you start. So thinking about that intra-company collaboration and having that be something that becomes a given, not an exception, that every company is already trying to do and should embrace. The next is think about where you can collaborate more and better with your customers, with your partners, with your vendors, where you're doing it today. Like, one of the things I want to make sure we walk away from is that I shouldn't be telling you anything today that you're not either doing today or trying to do today. This is not anything new. It's about doing it better, doing it more efficiently, and raising this up from the infrastructure level into what problems you're trying to solve. So cross-company collaboration, everyone's doing it today. How do you do that? Think about doing that better. Something that, again, a lot of people are doing is monetization of their data and figuring out how to monetize their data and provide it as services that they're doing today in a more efficient way. Thinking about your external data sources and finding ways to remove all that friction, remove all that cost, remove all that brittleness of how external data is coming in, and leveraging platforms like Snowflake Data Exchange as the way to get that data in real time. Evaluating the ways to not only get data, but have data enriched, so that if I have data and I need to send it out for a marketing campaign, I have data that I want to send it out to do, you name it, then I want to have I want predictions on where the trends are, these kind of data enrichment services. Particularly interesting in even the cybersecurity space. If I have logs and I want to see what threats I have, that's something that is a blending together with my data and these external parties, external vendors' data, bringing that together. Again, this is another case of doing real-time collaboration on the Snowflake Exchange. And then thinking about this as this data exchange, this is one of the insights that we got working with a lot of our customers, was basically that it's great. I want to be able to bring in and for data sets that I'm bringing in from third-party sources, but a lot of third-party sources are my own ecosystem, and that's core to my business. So I want to be able to catalog my data sets internally and catalog my data sets externally of my ecosystem, and again, wrap that in that same kind of exchange framework so that I can be more clear about who are my data vendors, who are my data partners, and be able to bring that universal catalog across my organization so that I can really get my hands around these tools. And really, if you think about it, having this chief data officer have something that they can actually demonstrate. This is our platform. This is our company. These are our customers. These are our vendors. right? This becomes the materialization of our business at a level of saying, like, this is the data that we have, this is the data we're providing, this is the customers we have, and bringing that exchange, which is a combination of my external data assets and my internal data assets, all within a collaboration framework that really can differentiate you from your from others in your industry. And the last, this is something that I think is a concept that I think is becoming more and more relevant. Is, as I'm sure everyone in the audience, I won't poll the audience, but everyone in the audience has seen this massive content unbundling that was kicked off by Netflix, where the notion of getting all of your content from one vendor that packaged up all these primary sources of content was something that was just the way things had to be done. They were these aggregators were you got all your data, all your content from your cable provider, from your satellite provider, right? That content is now being unbundled, so you're going to get some of your content from Netflix, some of your content from Disney Plus, some of it from Comcast's own direct content service, and having this HBO have the same thing. So that kind of content unbundling is something that we are seeing now happening in the data space, right? Now that you have these platforms like Snowflake Data Exchange that can make anyone who has data reach all of their customers in a low-friction way, the notion of having to go through data aggregators is being disrupted. So this notion of data unbundling is something real. So and I encourage you all to think about, how do you unbundle your data sources and get the data sources you need and pay for what you use, as opposed to getting bundled data that you may or may not use, and that you're paying a high bar of friction to be able to get that data. Think about what data sets you'd want to get more direct and be able to reach out to those primaries in this notion of data unbundling. And then last, I know I said 5, but I think this is something that's super interesting as well as a bonus, is now that you're embracing this notion of data being in this unified data network. As I mentioned earlier, one of the hard problems that had been unsolved in the past was that if I wanted to basically securely blend my data with my partners without revealing PII, now that we can exchange data, in this case, let's say there's an advertising partner who wants to work with a retailer to be able to see who should we be targeting without having to reveal that data, or even with a brand company, being able to blend that data together in an aggregated way without revealing PII was unheard of, and now this platform enables that for the first time to be done in a way that hasn't been done before. So these data clean rooms are no longer a concept that just you can dream about or no longer have bespoke solutions for. This is now something that everyone can do out of the box today by embracing platforms like Snowflake with this notion of real-time exchange of data without having to ship that data across. So again, super interesting use case. We'll provide some links on how to do that in the resource section. So just to summarize again, 5, with a bonus of strategies, how you can kickstart your data analytics efforts at your own companies. The first one, hire a chief data officer, hire a CDO. Second, invest in a true cross-cloud data platform. Third, investigate the value of the data assets you already have. 4, enable your organization to securely collaborate amongst all the data you have at your fingertips. 5, investigate unbundling all of your data sources and get the data sources you need and pay for what you use. And the bonus, investigate and look into these data clean rooms with secure joins in platforms like Snowflake. So with that, I appreciate you all listening in. I think we have some questions teed up. So Daniel, if you could kick off some questions.
Hey, Matt, thank you for the presentation. Sure thing. We've got some questions that came up. during the presentation. Let me go through here. So the first one is asking about data sharing in Snowflake, and is asking how much does data sharing with Snowflake cost? Can you talk about that?
Sure. Oh, it's a great question. So the best part of the answer to the question doesn't cost you anything, right? This is something that we at Snowflake we're not trying to make a market by taking any kind of cut of any kind of monetization on platform. It's your data, it's your customers, it's your partners. It costs us nothing to give you the tools to grant access to the other side. It costs you nothing. And better than that, you don't have to have, like as I mentioned, you don't have to have the cost of running and hosting the compute around that data. So it's better than free. It's actually saving you money because now whoever you're sharing data with, whoever you're exchanging data with, is bringing their own compute to analyze that data. So it really only costs you the price of storing data, which likely you were going to do anyway for your own internal analysis. So it actually is going to cost you less than free. And with an extra bonus is because the more of our customers are exchanging data on platform, the better. As a function of how much data you share with your customers, with your partners, with your with your vendors, we will provide you a rebate back to you based on how much data is consumed on the other side. So it really is less than free. You actually can reduce your cost of putting your own data in, to zero by exchanging and providing access and providing real-time sharing of your data.
Great. Thank you for that. There was some couple questions coming up from Snowflake customers about being able to access the data exchange from their Snowflake accounts. I think I should just mention that, right, that the data exchange is being rolled out and to different regions and different clouds. So I think you'd suggest they should just reach out to their account managers for availability in their regions. Is that correct?
Yes. No. Again, we're slowly rolling this out as we get feedback from customers. But yes, if you're interested, please reach out to your account teams. If you're not a customer yet, please, as part of signing up, ask about getting access to the exchange as part of signing up. It will be by the time of our conference in June. We'll have it. Our goal is to have it globally deployed. But yes, please reach out, to your account team to get you signed up, as we roll out the preview.
There was another question here about data sharing, and they were asking if the data sharing with Snowflake only works between Snowflake accounts, or what if they want to share with someone who does not have a Snowflake account?
Great question. And this is something we realized early on. It's becoming less of an issue now as we have more critical mass across industry. But we recognize that there will be cases, obviously, when whoever you're exchanging data with is not yet a Snowflake customer. So what we've done is we now allow you as a provider of data to, obviously, if the person you were sharing with, exchanging data with, has an account, you can do everything we talked about. If not, we give you the ability to create we call it a reader or a sub account, where you could basically grant the other side who doesn't have an account yet to have their own account that you're effectively paying for in the meantime, to make from your point of view, you can have a uniform distribution model, and then effectively you provide accounts that are segregated, and you can have resources and budgets on those accounts. But effectively, you as a provider can now create these accounts for your customers who aren't yet on Snowflake, and that way you can effectively now cover your entire customer base.
Perfect. There's a question here, Matt, about what is the protocol that is used for the data exchange or for exchanging data in Snowflake, and maybe it just requires a little bit of clarification of how the data sharing works in Snowflake.
Yep, no, it's a great question, and it's sort of I'm glad it was asked, because it's sort of the heart of the point of this, is that the protocol is SQL. Right? The idea is if I'm going to exchange data with, with my, marketing partner, I provide them access. They accept that access. That becomes effectively a read-only database in their account. And now I can use that data with doing straight up regular SQL that will query that data that I've gotten access to. I can join that data with my own, super critical, as performantly as if I'd gotten a copy and loaded it myself. So it's just straight up SQL, all the mechanism that's behind the scenes that's making that happen, which again, really came out naturally by the fact that Snowflake was this isolated workload platform that could allow different businesses to work on the same data at the same time. This ability to exchange data across enterprises fell out of that. So all this looks like is just another database. It just so happens that it's updating in a way that I don't, have to think about. But then it's straight up SQL from there.
Perfect. There are also some questions related to security about, are there ways to implement row-level security, column-level security, and different security measures for sharing data with Snowflake?
Great question. So yes. So because this data is not being shipped, right? The data is now staying in place, and I'm granting access to it to the other side. I can do fine-grained access control that I can basically create a database view on top of my data and grant access to that view instead of granting access directly to my tables. And these views, like any other database view, can now dynamically evaluate based on who's consuming that data, that can filter, that can mask, that can basically have even different customers hitting the same view and have it for multi-tenant data sets, have that data basically serve up the appropriate filtered data based on who is consuming it. So that's number one, is the notion that you can put these views around it and not expose the underlying data. The second other interesting way to secure this data, again, so it's not moving, is instead of providing table access or even view access, I can provide functions or user-defined functions that I share instead, where I can basically provide that function that's going to look things up based on some identifier that will look up things that of the data that I have that the consumer can't see and just return the results. So you have both the ability to secure data at a row or column level with real role-based access control by wrapping it with views, and then you want to get even finer grained. You can provide functions on data that you share instead that can give really fine-grained access control on what data is going to be looked up and how.
Cool. There's an interesting question here asking if the data sharing requires you to have a private pipeline between the customers sharing data, or is it using the public network?
That's an interesting question, and it's interesting because basically, however you are configuring your connectivity to the cloud or to your Snowflake is the pipeline that we're going to use. So, and customers have a choice where you can either connect to Snowflake via a public internet pathway, which many customers do, or you can connect to Snowflake leveraging the cloud providers' direct connect and private link kind of capabilities that most of the cloud providers now have, and connect over public pipeline. And then once you're in, then all the traffic is private based on how you've connected. So really the same way you're connecting today, in whichever way that you feel is the will you ever feel more comfortable with it. You're leveraging that private network where you can. And the converse part of that question is that data that you're receiving is if you own the data and you own the encryption key that encrypted that data, you maintain that control even if it's being consumed by one of your partners. So the same way that, again, this all comes back down to encryption and managing your encryption keys. Being able to manage the encryption key now not only protects your data amongst your enterprise, but now you're holding that data control as well to who you're exchanging data with. So your encryption key is going to follow your data, and as soon as you pull that data, or as soon as that data is being accessed, you can now pull it, and the entire pipeline is revoked. So you actually now have this secure way of not only going over. I know I answered a different question, but I think it's worth noting. Not only can you go over private networking, on reaching into your cloud endpoint, but now your data is following that private networking, and also you have this control leveraging your own encryption key to protect your data wherever it's going to be consumed by whoever you've given access to it.
Perfect. The next question is about the data exchange, and how is that Snowflake data exchange different from other data marketplaces out there?
Yep. Great question. And I think this is something that we've thought a lot about, both in our public exchange that we have all of our customers have access to, but also in these private exchanges where you can effectively create your own ecosystem in your own marketplace. I think where many of these marketplaces that I've seen, many of our customers have talked to us about, a lot of these marketplaces have failed mainly because it was another place you had to go to find and explore data that was not where you're actually doing your work. Where Snowflake took the opposite approach is that we started from building the most capable place to work with your data, the most secure place to put your data, the most elastic place to work with your data, the most workload isolating place to actually do real analytics. And since now that you're doing your work there, having Exchange be an extension of that is now much more natural, because I'm already doing my work there. I'm already putting my data there. I already have this kind of gravity that's pulled me into doing my analytics there. I'm not going somewhere else. Now I can, instead of having to go and think about I'm going to get access to data, I'm going to have that copied somewhere else and pulled out of a bucket somewhere. Right now, I'm live. I'm here. I have been granted access. I'm going. I'm not having to move data around. So the fact that we had this gravity effect already, where customers are basically consolidating their data sources into their warehouse and having this be their warehouse, now all of a sudden gets access to more data that they can evaluate without having to think about going somewhere else. That's the major differentiating factor, is that you're already there. This is already where your data is. This is already where your analytics is. This is just an extension that just naturally is occurring. I think that's what's driving a lot of our adoption in this space.
There's some questions here with the same theme, and basically they were asking about API and data sharing, and maybe if you could touch upon when would you use API versus when would you want to use the Snowflake data sharing?
Yep, great question. I think this is one of those kind of, I guess, head fakes that the industry went to, which was basically saying that everything should be an API, and even when I was basically having to exchange a petabyte of data, it was somehow going to be an API. APIs are good if it's operational functions, right? If I want to, buy something, I want to buy a toothbrush on an online store, an API to do that, and an API to fetch payment, right? Operational flow like that, APIs are great, right? But when I want to get access to data that's going to be able to allow me to blend data at scale, particularly when you think about analytics or training models, or just APIs are just not going to scale. I mean, I come back to the straw metaphor here, right? You're just never going to be able to suck down all that data, through an API, right? So operational flows where you want to be able to, perform an operational action, APIs are great. When you want to be able to get access to data at scale, to be able to collaborate with data you have and effectively take your entire ecosystem and materialize it in such a unified place in the cloud, that's where the Exchange is your answer.
Nice. And there's also a few questions about the data clean room and asking if you could give an example of that type of implementation.
Sure. So we'll put a reference in the notes on actually how to physically do that today with the Exchange and user-defined functions. But again, the use cases that I like to think about is that if I have, again, think about good example. If I have patient data, right, and patient data is protected, and I can't share patient data with someone who's evaluating a certain kind of drug, right? So if I have that kind of patient data and I have some kind of pharmaceutical company, being able to say that I can now effectively hash and join on a hash and then roll up to a resulting data set, because I still want to perform that join, but I just don't want to reveal the PII data that is keying that data. So by effectively creating a hash on each of those data sets, joining on the hash, and having Snowflake as a trusted third party who can't see the data but could effectively implement that secure join, it's that simple as that. I mean, think about a clean room is just a secure join that is done by this trusted third party who can basically effectively provide that join without either party having that data revealed. And this is something that we'll be looking to make even more streamlined, but we'll provide a pointer to a blog that demonstrates how to do this today in a platform, which again I think is one of the unanswered questions up until this time. That'll be looking forward to seeing this virtual rooms feedback as well. But I think it's one of the more interesting use cases of how to use a secure join, which is effectively as simple as that, to implement data clean rooms across industry, regardless of what you're thinking.
Great. The next question here is asking about when you're doing sharing of data in Snowflake, what type of access are you giving to the other party to your database? Is it a read-only access? What type of access do you give when you're sharing the data?
Yep, great question. So this is it is read-only. So if I have my data, I'm granting access to read it at as fine-grained a level as we talked about earlier as possible. And that's the kind of typical pattern we see is I have data. Either I have data about different of my customers and I want to narrow it down, or I want to, grant certain kind of a view on data that is potentially, strips away any of the identifying information, whatever. That's the typical model. Another use case we touched on it briefly, which is basically having my customers provide me data for enrichment. So, which is still read-only in the sense that I can only access the data that's being provided to me, but I can then take that data, enrich it, and then share it back in yet another kind of read-only view. So data is meant to be provided and received in a read-only fashion, but it doesn't mean that data stops there. I can now take that data, transform it, enrich it, and potentially provide it back in a enriched form, like the use case I mentioned earlier with cybersecurity, where I can provide my logs to a cybersecurity vendor. They can then take those logs, compare it with their own, blend it with what they know about what other risks going on, provide that enriched data back in a very differentiated way, which doesn't involve having to ship data back and forth, since it's it's pointer access in both directions. So it reads, but there's some interesting interactions you can have by now that I can give you a pointer, you can give me back a pointer. You can provide these kind of interesting kind of enrichment scenarios as well.
Cool. And the other question here, Matt, is about Snowflake, and he's asking that the core data warehouse, data mart type use case, if you can also use Snowflake as an operational data store for real-time data operational reporting as well. Can you talk about that?
Sure. No, I think this is a great another great question of the kind of the blurring of the line, right? Where you're basically, because you now have this, true elastic platform, right? Many customers now are using this for not only the kind of off-cycle, off-market kind of questions, but because I can now give SLAs that are real and workload isolation, you can actually do real operational reporting on this single copy of data, right? That doesn't mean if you have a shopping cart and you're going to basically have people doing, buying things and, that's not the workload. That's OLTP workload is separate. But if you're having analytics, even operational production workloads, many of our customers are actually doing this today, and it makes complete sense. And I think we're going to see more and more of both that use case becoming even more popular, as well as the investments we make in the platform are going to be further accelerating that, given that there's so much demand to have less copies and to have more of a real-time consolidated view. But today, this is something that a common practice today is to use Snowflake for operational workloads, operational reporting as well.
Nice. The next question, it goes back to data sharing, and they were asking about what is the performance that you can expect from data sharing?
That's another great question, is that because data is not moving, right, it's as performant for me to query and join data that's being shared and provided to me as if I had loaded it myself. There is no difference in performance. So I can do, I don't have to think about making a copy. I always have the latest version, and the performance is all the scale you can bring with a true elastic cloud platform, where I can now spin up as much resources as I need and then spin it down when I'm not. All that applies to not only the data that I've loaded, but all the data that I've now gotten access to, because there is no difference. Right? This is all, think of Snowflake as a true global multi-tenant cross-region platform. And now I can basically just load my data, blend it with the data that I have access to with my partners and my customers, and then, and just take out all the headache that was unnecessary, where I was basically having to think about data pipes and things that all goes away. Think about what enrichments you want to do with your data, what enrichments you want to do with this blended data, but all the machinery that was involved in getting the data into X different data marts to try to get performance out of that goes away. And now you get as good performance as you would have and way better, because now you can bring all the cloud scale to the problem as well.
Nice. So we're almost at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful to everyone's time. I think this was a great presentation, Matt, and awesome questions from the audience. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to reach out to us and make sure to answer that. But with that, I'd like to thank you, Matt, for your time in doing the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, which is being recorded. So you should see an email tomorrow with the link to that recording. With that, thanks, everyone, and we'll end the webcast right now.